Hello, friends. Happy Monday. Welcome into an all-new episode of the Pack a Day Podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. You can find the podcast at Pack a Day Podcast. Thanks as always for being here. Yes, the streak is over. 1,610 consecutive days doing a video. Yesterday, I did not do a video. Would have been 1,611 consecutive days. My apologies for not getting a video out yesterday. We did keep the podcast streak alive, however. On the audio side, there was a podcast still posted yesterday. So we are 2,391 days today with consecutive podcasts being put out. But on the video side, we did for the first time miss a Andy episode or a video episode in some capacity. So that streak dies at 1,610 days. Thank you for being along. For all of you who have listened to all 1,610 days, I appreciate you. We start a brand new streak today. Just to give you an idea, and let me just say there's more than a handful of you who checked up on me asking if I was okay after missing a day and things like that. Yes, totally fine. Just a series of weird, bizarro circumstances, if you will. So I knew on Friday that Saturday was going to be insane. So I really needed to get both my Friday and Saturday episodes done on Friday. Fortunately, things just got crazy on Friday and got the Friday episode done, but did not get a chance to get to the Saturday episode. So woke up extra early on Saturday to record the episode for Sunday on Saturday. Just, again, other stuff came up, wasn't able to get to it. Then my son had a handful of basketball games in Appleton, or at least three or four basketball games in Appleton. Went to those, was going to have a very tight window to get back, to come back, record the episode, get it uploaded. And then I had an event going on at 7 p.m. at night, which is, again, why I knew I had to upload early. With the weather being terrible, and it was a drive from Appleton, had to take back roads on the way back. All of my time between the basketball game and the event at 7 was nuked. And then by the time I got back from the event, it was 3 a.m. in the morning. And let's just say I was in no condition to do anything at that point. And then was pretty sick from said event yesterday. And then planned on trying to go live right before the Super Bowl, just to do a live quick video, just to get something out there, maybe for a half an hour, answer some quick questions and things like that. That didn't happen. I thought about doing it post game. Unfortunately, was still not feeling the best. So that is how we got to our 1 day off of videos, and then was still not feeling well enough to record it for my usual 5 a.m. Monday morning episode. But here we are. You guys should be getting this probably about noon on Monday. We should have a mock draft Monday from Ross later today as well. So we'll be right back on track, and I appreciate everyone's patience, and I apologize for any inconvenience in not having those episodes out, but or at least on time today. But that is the story. I've actually had this Byron Murphy episode prepped for some time now, for like the last few days, ready to go. Just unfortunately did not get to it. Before we get to Byron Murphy, and we've got obviously a lot to go over today, want to obviously talk a little bit of a Super Bowl. I'll just say this, Philly was phenomenal. They were fantastic. And this was a defensive line that just dominated through the entirety of the day. I am still a pretty big believer that building through the trenches is a great way to win Super Bowls. You have to be able to protect the quarterback. We saw how important running the football was this season, although oddly enough, not in this game, right? Saquon was limited. Chiefs did everything they could to limit Saquon. It was 2-point-something yards per carry. Held under 100 yards total. I think he was in the 50s for rushing yards. Like they did everything they could to stop Saquon in the running game, but it was just too much Philly. And Philly's offensive line, defensive lines, just both fantastic. And then you have the litany of playmakers on both sides of the ball as well. What they did on the defensive backfield to make that group over with C.J. Gardner-Johnson, Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, Zach Bond picking up a linebacker for super cheap and him becoming a first-team All-Pro. Obviously, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Jahan Dotson even had a couple of big plays in this game who they made the trade for prior to the start of the season, getting Mekhi back in. I mean, it just kind of goes to show you have to hit on everything, right? Value free agents, Zach Bond, Mekhi Becton, both great examples of that. Those were value free agents that Philly signed, and Bond became a first-team All-Pro, and Becton was a big-time solid starter for them at right guard all season long. I mean, two big-time free agent signings that if they would have paid really 18 to 20 million for either of those guys, maybe that's a little bit much for an off-ball linebacker, but even in that range, like your first-team All-Pro linebacker, you wouldn't have batted an eye at the production that you got from both of those guys, right? And they got them for super cheap. Big-time free agent signings. I don't know if I would put CJ Gardner-Johnson quite in that territory, but he was still a big signing. And then, of course, Saquon Barkley hit on both of those guys and what they were able to add to the team. Draft, again, you're aggressively going corner and fixing that defensive backfield, and Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean, 2 A+ draft picks. Coordinators, they go out and get Vic Fangio, they get Kellen Moore, and both were sort of interesting hires, right? Because Kellen Moore, didn't exactly tear it up in Dallas. There were some questions as to whether or not he'd be the right fit with Jalen Hurts, and it was a fantastic fit. He really made that offense go, is now going to be the head coach in New Orleans by all accounts. And then defensively, Vic Fangio, if you remember all the Fangio defenses last year, all the ones that were, whether it was the old Chargers coach, whose name is avoiding me for the moment, obviously Joe Barry, Vic Fangio himself in Miami, like all the Fangio coaches were massively struggling. I don't think there was any in the top half of the NFL in overall defensive rankings this past in 2023. So to go out and get Vic Fangio this past offseason, it felt like, all right, well, teams have already figured out that defense. Good luck with that. And he just takes that defense and turns them from one of the worst in the NFL to one of the best, if not the best in the NFL. So it just kind of goes to show you want to, be able to get to that level. You have to hit on everything. And of course, they had a good foundation already. And they've hit already on free agents, trades like AJ Brown, draft picks like Jalen Hurts. We can go on. Jordan Mailata, finding a rugby player in the 7th round of the draft, 6th or 7th round. I forget which one it was. I think it was 7th. Obviously, again, 1st round picks like Lane Johnson, turning out the way that he did. And the crazy thing is too, is like they lost Fletcher Cox and Jason Kelsey along those lines, and Hassan Reddick, and still went out and performed at a super high level. Bryce Huff, like it was pretty incredible. So they got Bryce Huff from the Jets. Sorry, they lost Hassan Reddick. They got Bryce Huff. My apologies, but you get my point. Like they were not quite the same, just coming off the Reddick, Cox and Kelsey departures, and yet still were able to find replacements at a very high level. Just a solid job all the way around by Howie Roseman. And again, I'll just say one more time, it really goes to show you exactly what you need to hit on just about everything in order to be that quality of a team. They were clearly the best team in the NFL. They were clearly the deserving Super Bowl champions, wiped the floor with Washington in the NFC Championship game, wiped the floor with KC in the Super Bowl. And yes, 22-10 maybe doesn't look quite so bad for Green Bay, but there's no consolation prizes. You don't get a little bit of extra boost because the team that beat you ultimately became the champion. So Green Bay still got to figure out a way to close that gap on Philly this next year. And we just saw the blueprint to do it. Got to hit on some value free agents, got to hit on your big time free agents, and you've got to hit on your draft picks. And it's going to be up to Goody. Of course, one of the key talking points from that game from a Packers standpoint was immediately Cooper DeJean. Oh, Green Bay should have taken Cooper DeJean. Let's put some things clear here for a moment. If first of all, I know a lot of people went into that draft wanting Cooper DeJean at 25. It was not some sort of revisionist history, right? It's not like, well, after the fact, we know now that DeJean's good. They should have drafted DeJean. I know a huge chunk of Packer fans who wanted DeJean at pick 25, all just hoping he would be there at 25 going into that draft. He was, and Green Bay passed on him. So it's not revisionist history. I'll add on top of that, if Green Bay right now could go back and have the choice between Jordan Morgan or Cooper DeJean, I would be pretty confident that they would take Cooper DeJean with the benefit of hindsight. I will also say this is not in defense of Brian Gutekunst in any major way. We have been very clear and have talked about there needs to be a massive change with how Green Bay does with selecting their first round picks. They have not been good enough in getting the ROI on their top first round picks. And you look at that's Eric Stokes, Quay Walker, Devontae Wyatt, LVN. Yeah, again, Jordan Morgan was hurt, so it's tough to make a full evaluation there. But just in general, the overall return on investment on their first round picks have not been good enough. So this is not a defense of Brian Gutekunst in any major way. But what I will say is, if there was ever a Super Bowl that showed you why it's important to build through the trenches, make sure you have a really good offensive line, really good pass rush, this is the one. Philly dominated in the trenches all playoffs long, and it got them a Super Bowl. Obviously, again, AJ Brown, Jalen Hurts, Quinyon Mitchell, we can go on and on. They're star players at premium positions outside of offensive and defensive line. Saquon Barkley were really good as well. So I'm not saying that wasn't the case, but this team was dominant in the trenches. So I understand why they would want to go with a Jordan Morgan. I was not a Jordan Morgan guy going into that draft or immediately after. I think most of you guys know that. But I think to crap on Jordan or to say that, he's not going to be good or that it was a complete, like, let's see what he can do in year 2. He was expected to be a starter this past year, probably would have been, or at least played a bunch had he stayed healthy. It was a shoulder injury that he never had issues with before. Just one of those fluke things. It is what it is. I thought he looked okay when he was in the games. He didn't look overmatched by any means, which is a pretty good opening sign, but he definitely needs to get better if he wants to be a really good offensive lineman in this league. We'll see if he can do that. We'll see what he can bring to the table this next year. But I will say this, Green Bay really could have used Jordan Morgan in that game against Philly when all their offensive linemen were out and you were down to Travis Glover and Kadeem Telfort, and it did not go very well with those guys filling in. So oddly enough, they could have really used Jordan Morgan against Philly. Unfortunately, just had that injury issue. Getting off the Super Bowl topic for a second, Aaron Rodgers is not going to be a New York Jet next year per multiple outlets. I think Jay Glazer was the one that really had the full report. I think Jordan Schultz was a little bit before that in saying that it is not expected that he was going to be back. Then there was this weird Jets beat writers were upset that there was nothing to report, and then there was this weird back and forth. But it all seems to be that it is now known that Rodgers will not be a Jet in 2025 and beyond. Clearly a catastrophic trade for New York. I mean, we can say that pretty clearly. I'm still a believer that the best trades are the ones that work out for everyone, players and teams combined. If it works out for Green Bay and Philly and all the players, that's the best version of the trade, right? This has worked out pretty darn well for Green Bay, although, LVN and some other stuff, maybe it could have been better in that trade. Obviously, they would have got a first-round pick instead of a second-round pick if Rodgers had played that first season in its entirety. But overall, I think it's worked out well for Green Bay. It worked out brutally for New York, worked out awful for Aaron Rodgers, although I know he says it's been the best, 2 years of his life. So I don't know, maybe it worked out for him in some odd, weird way. But overall, a nightmare trade for the Jets. Really set their franchise back probably at least 5 years. I mean, at least got everyone basically in the organization fired. And now Aaron's got to figure out if he wants to continue to play. So I kind of have a sneaky Pittsburgh Steelers kind of feeling. There's been some reports that both Justin Fields and Russell Wilson, they are going to maybe go in a different direction on. There's not really a quarterback in the draft where they're selecting that you would think they'd be interested in. I don't know. Maybe it's Sam Darnold, but he's kind of the only guy in free agency now, unless, Aaron Rodgers is that guy. So I could see Tomlin, Rodgers coming together. Pittsburgh's not that far off. You would certainly think that Rodgers would give them a little bit better of a quarterback than the sort of the Fields Wilson duo did last year, but that's not a guarantee either. Rodgers is continuing to get older. We'll see. Maybe he just calls it quits, but he will not be a Jet this upcoming season. Last but not least, Josh Sweat, Milton Williams got a really good glimpse of exactly what they could do. One of the things I talked about in my video for them this past week was keep an eye on those two in this game. They're both free agents. Both could be added to this pass rush for Green Bay. Well, they went out and put on a show, specifically Josh Sweat. He was phenomenal in that game. Milton Williams with a big strip sack of Patrick Mahomes as well. But if you haven't had the chance to check out that episode, make sure to do so. Could be some very interesting options there in Sweat and Williams for Green Bay. And Sweat definitely to a very high extent balled out against KC in the Super Bowl. Arguably could have been Super Bowl MVP. Was probably never going to be as a defensive end, right? But arguably was in that conversation for sure. All right, let's get to our main topic for today, and that is Byron Murphy, the Vikings corner, who I think Green Bay could legitimately have some interest in. So I wanted to go over this as a player I've been really excited to watch and talk about. I think it probably goes without saying as to why Green Bay would potentially be interested in a Byron Murphy and why corner is a need, but we'll go through it again anyway. Carrington Valentine, Keyshawn Nixon, Jair Alexander are your outside corners. You've got Javon Bullard in the slot, and then you've got 4 other corners that are technically on the roster, but you're not going to base any decisions on. That's Kamal Haddon, Kalen King, Isaiah Dunn, and Caleb Hayes. If you get anything out of those 4, you just take it as a bonus. Jair likely gone. That's the overarching feel, is that he will not be back in Green Bay. Not impossible, but likely, which really leaves you just with Nixon and Valentine as true corners, and then Bullard as a sort of safety slot guy. And then, 4 other corners that, again, you're not banking anything on. So they definitely need depth, competition, starting caliber talent. It's a need for Green Bay. There's no two ways around it. And you would always love a little bit more juice, flexibility, and again, competition in that secondary. And you would think Byron Murphy would certainly be able to bring that to a large extent. And then, of course, you have an added bonus as well. And that's that you're taking him away from the Vikings. If he returns to Minnesota, that's another good cover corner that they have at their disposal. If he's in Green Bay, well, then they don't have Byron Murphy. So there's kind of that little added bonus there potentially as well. From a contract standpoint, He is PFF's 33rd highest graded free agent on the market this year. Again, that's per PFF's rankings. They are expecting a 3-year, $17.3 million per year deal with $34.5 million guaranteed and a $52 million total salary. It's a pretty hefty salary overall. Spotrac is expecting even more. 4 years, $22.1 million per year, $88.4 million total. So if you're looking to sign Byron Murphy, you're probably looking somewhere in that $17 to $22 million per year range in order to acquire his services. It's a big contract. You'd have to be pretty sold on Byron Murphy overall. He played in 18 games this past season, 18 starts, 81 tackles, 6 tackles for loss, 0 quarterback hits, 6 interceptions, 14 pass breakups, 1 forced fumble, and was a Pro Bowl selection. One of the things that I want to talk about as I went back and watched the tape are the 6 interceptions that he had. I will very much tell you that there were a lot of gifts within these 6 interceptions. The first one was the Jordan Love throw in week 4 against Minnesota, where he was coming back from injury. They had that comeback, and then he threw off his back foot and just threw it deep and threw it right to Byron Murphy. I mean, Byron Murphy had fine coverage on the play, but that was a gift to Byron Murphy. Matthew Stafford then overthrew a pass right to Byron Murphy. That was another gift. Then he had a great play against Joe Flacco. That one was not a gift. That was a fantastic play by Byron Murphy. Then on the next one, Mac Jones threw him a pick. It was good coverage by Murphy, but an awful decision. He threw it right to Byron Murphy. There's nobody open. Never should have been thrown. And again, credit Murphy for having good coverage on the play, but that was an awful decision. Pretty much a huge gift by Mac Jones. Then Kyler Murray threw him a complete gift. I have no idea what Kyler Murray was doing on that play. Threw it up, and he was just waiting there. So Murphy got another gift there. And then Cousins had an awful overthrow where he also had a gift thrown to him. But on that one, he did make a glorious one-handed catch. So at least he paid that one off with a crazy one-handed catch. But 5 of his 6 interceptions were gift throws from quarterbacks. One of those 5, he had to make a pretty spectacular play on just to make the catch on the one-hander. But other than that, really the play against Flacco was his only one where he had great coverage, jumped a route, made a big play on it. That was the one. The other ones were a little bit, handed on a silver platter to him, just for whatever that's worth. Per PFF, he was targeted 109 times, allowed 77 completions. So quarterbacks completed a 70.6% completion percentage rate when targeting him this past year. He gave up 779 yards, 4 touchdowns, but those aforementioned 6 interceptions. He had 4 penalties, 5 pass breakups. Again, remember, the NFL stats have him at 14. PFF only had him at 5. 80 passer rating. So that's a really good passer rating for a corner in that situation. And then he also had 72 tackles, but missed 16 tackles as well, which is very, very high for a corner. In his career, he's been targeted 519 times, allowed 354 completions, 68.2% completion percentage, 3,722 yards, 32 touchdowns, 14 interceptions, 36 pass breakups, 29 penalties, a 98.1 passer rating with 321 tackles, 68 missed tackles, and a 15.7% missed tackle rate. Again, those are per PFF. Also per PFF, he had a 73.4 grade this past year, 67.1 run defense grade, 43.2 tackling grade, so a very poor tackling grade, and a 73.5 coverage grade. His PFF grades year over year, this past year again was 73.4. Before that was 58.0, 66.7, 58.5, 64.7, and 48.3. So he's had some not great seasons in there per PFF as well, including 2023, where he only had a 58.0 grade, in his rookie year, where he had a 48.3 grade, a 58.5 grade in there as well. He had a tackling grade of 29 in 2023. So if you thought his tackling grade was bad this year, it was even worse in 2023. It's definitely an issue. And it should be noted that he's got a couple outlier grades here this past year, right? His 73.4 PFF grade in 2024, he never had anything above a 63.9 in any other year before that. So he was significantly better when it came to his overall grade, and his coverage grade was better than it had been in his career as well. So just a little bit noteworthy there that this is probably arguably the best season of his career that he's coming off of. From a scouting report standpoint, just turned 27 in January. That's one key thing here. He's in the prime of his career, which is always nice. You do a 3-year deal, you're going to get him at ages 27, 28, 29. that's kind of when you want, right? Like that's a very good deal for the team that you're getting him in the 3 kind of prime years of his career. 5'11", 190 pounds, had a relative athletic score of 6.41 coming out of college with a 4.55 40-yard dash, which was under the 50th percentile for corners. He was a second-round pick, picked 33 overall in the 2019 draft. Let's get to the positives. The first positive is that he can play outside or inside. You can play him at outside corner. You can also play him in the slot. We know how much Green Bay values versatility. So the fact that if you want him outside, you can play him outside. You put Nixon or Bullard in the slot, or if you want Nixon outside, Bullard at safety, you can then put, you can put Murphy in the slot in that situation. Would give Green Bay a lot of flexibility and a lot of versatility in that secondary. Also has good size for the position. I know he's 5'11", 190. He looks and plays bigger than that. Like he looks like he has great size. Like you're not seeing him go up against receivers that are just like, mossing him out, physically him. He's built proportionally well. Like he looks like, if I would have guessed, I would have probably said 6 feet, 6'1", and probably like 195, 200. I would probably guess a little bit something closer to that. So while he's only 5'11", 190, he plays bigger than that and he looks bigger than that on the field. Doesn't panic at the catch point. That's one of the huge things that you can have as a corner is when you get thrown at, you're not panicking or flailing or starting to grab. You're just getting your head around, you're playing the ball, and you're not giving away any free yardage via penalty, right? So I love the fact that he doesn't have that panic in him. If he does give up a completion, he doesn't have the mentality where he's going to get down on himself. He's going to get right back there and play the next play the way that it needs to be played. And again, there's no fear there whatsoever. And you don't ever see him get to a point where he's just like completely unsure of himself or panicky and has that veteran mentality. That was kind of my next one too. Veteran savvy, like just understands the game, understands route concepts, understands the communication of it all. Very rarely saw him in the wrong spot or doing the wrong thing. Like he just had a very pros pro approach to the game. And you could see that easily on tape. There are times where he will run the routes for the wide receivers or tight ends, just completely on top of it. And like knowing exactly where they're going to go. Like I'm assuming a lot of tape study that goes into that. But again, just having the veteran IQ to be able to know what type of route concepts are going to come and how to attack them and how to sometimes almost run them for the wide receiver or the tight end. I really liked him in trail technique with safeties over the top. I thought that was when he was at his best. He did okay in off coverage, but we'll talk about the tackling struggles in just a moment. So kind of that trail technique where, again, he can kind of understand what they're trying to do, have the safety over the top, and then, kind of make the play underneath. That seemed to be where he was kind of mostly at his best. He does attack wide receiver screens pretty well. Again, not the most physical guy in the world, but overall attacks those. He does a solid job of it. I'll just put it that way. Had that phenomenal one-handed interception against Atlanta, and then he just does not get called for penalties. So he had 4 penalties in 2024, 4 in 2023, 0 in 2022. So he had 8 total penalties over the last 3 seasons. Not bad at all. Does not grab, hold, pass interfere. It is very rare to see him. Again, that goes kind of back to the doesn't panic at the catch point. You just don't see him make those mistakes. Negatives. Tackling is a massive issue. You can run at him. You can run reverses at him. You can drop it off in the flat to your running backs and they will make him miss. He's not super interested in being a big time run defender. So it is a liability and you just have to know that it's going to be a weakness with him. And like I said, the tackling was bad last year. Again, per PFF, it was even way worse the year before that. So it is definitely something that opposing teams are aware of and absolutely will attack. Rallying to the football is optional for him, it seems like at times. There are times where he does it. Other times he just takes a nice stroll through the park. I'm just going to walk my way over there and doesn't really have that urgency. A little haha Clinton Dix-ish at times where it just didn't have that emphasis of running to the football and rallying to it. More of just like, those guys will get it and we'll walk to it. There's other times he does, but you do see some times on tape where he's just more taking that casual stroll. Definitely dropped a couple of easy picks, which is going to happen from time to time. They're corners. It's not unforgivable, but he did definitely have some drops of interceptions that he could have had. I thought his makeup speed and overall speed were not great. It feels like he's, that 4.55 40 where he came out of college, which was already below average. It feels like it's even taken a step back. And if he is beat, he does not have the speed to get back in the play. And same thing, even just if he's one-on-one, if he's even, the other receiver is going to probably outrun him in those situations. So does not have that makeup speed or overall speed. Change of direction is, I would say, below average. Gives up far too much cushion. Now, I can't say for certain if that's by design or not. In Minnesota, they do some interesting things with blitzes and, are sometimes willing to allow the underneath stuff so you can rally and tackle to it. but there were a variety of plays where he gave up far too much cushion on the play overall. Gets caught flat-footed at times, will want to make that play underneath, and then people run by him. Takes bad angles to the football. Most of his interceptions were gifts. Let the wide receiver get behind him in zone, takes the underneath candy a lot. This is one that stood out of like, he kind of wants to come up and make that big play. And so anytime there's something underneath where he thinks the quarterback might go underneath, he wants to try to jump that to get that pick, but he ends up allowing some big plays behind him because he's not sticking with where he needs to, and he'll take that underneath bait and then allow some of those big completions on the backside of it. So he's got to be a little bit better and more disciplined when it comes to that. Only blitzed 5 times last year, which is really insane. For a Minnesota team that blitzes as much as they do, the fact that they only blitzed Byron Murphy 5 times maybe tells you that he's not great at it, or that they didn't trust him to do it a ton or didn't want to do it. I'm not sure. Maybe it's much ado about nothing, but the fact that they didn't really blitz him at all is kind of interesting, especially how much Minnesota blitzes and especially how much he was in the slot. As I mentioned, it was an outlier season. His overall PFF grade by almost 7 points and his highest coverage grade ever, which was almost by 10 points. So again, how much stock do you want to put into this one season? He's a good football player. And I think when we sort of get down to the conclusion here as to whether or not Green Bay should actually sign him, to me, if he's in that 17 to 22 million range, this would be another pretty significant overpay. And again, I don't know if that's what Green Bay is going to want to do, depending on how they feel about their corner room right now. He's a good, solid, but not great corner. But Green Bay does love their flexibility. They love their versatility. And I think he would definitely add to that, would add great competition. And you're getting a good football player. I mean, there's no way around that. I don't think he's great. I don't think he's 22 million a year good, but he's a good football player. I will say, I think the idea of Byron Murphy is better than what I saw on tape from Byron Murphy. Full transparency, I was pretty stoked about this one going into it. It's like, I'm going to really like Byron Murphy. This is going to be a big time free agent for Green Bay to sign. I think this one makes a ton of sense. And I got done with Byron Murphy and I was like, I'm okay. I'm pretty good with this one. Now, I will say this, the Vikings have had success with him. They've used him on an island. They've used him in the slot as an outside corner, and they won a lot of games with him this past year. So you can win with Byron Murphy, and he's going to give you that depth, the competition, the versatility. All of that's there, all of it. So it just depends on how much you value him. I don't see a 22 million a year corner. I see maybe closer to like a 12, maybe to 15 mil per year corner, but he's going to go for way more than that. I don't know if I would want to be in that business if I were Green Bay. The other thing I'll just add here is by watching Byron Murphy just reminded me how hard it is to play corner in the NFL. Like I say, he's a good player. He really is. I would certainly not be upset if Green Bay added him to the roster in some capacity. But, just remember when you're watching the Keyshawn Nixons of the world and Carrington Valentine's, like, it is a really tough position. Like, I gained a much greater respect for Keyshawn Nixon watching Byron Murphy tape, because I don't think the difference between the two is really all that big at all, quite frankly. In fact, I would probably take Murphy, but like, it's actually close. So, it's just a really, really difficult position to play. And the context and the conceptualization of the position is that bad things are always happening because, more often than not, you're going to allow completions. You're not always going to get, pass breakups. You're not going to get a ton of interceptions. Like, guys are going to complete passes on you. It's like just sort of the job description, and that's going to have a negative connotation that comes with it. So it's really, really hard to play really good corner in the NFL. I thought Byron Murphy did a good job of it. I didn't think he did a great job of it. And you're going to have to pay him as a great corner if you want to bring him to your team to have him play good corner. That's sort of the juxtaposition. Like, that's the hoop that you need to jump through to be like, do I want to pay him as a great corner, but only get a good corner in return? That's where I'm at with it. The verdict is that it's possible. Versatility is nice. I think he's a good corner. I think Green Bay will like him to some extent. I don't think this is where you want to spend your money, or 20 mil per year. He's a non-elite athlete. He is still in the prime of his career. And it's just kind of the same verdict as we've been going over with a lot of these free agents, that they're good football players, but they're probably going to get overpaid. It's not an elite player. And I don't think that that's where I'd want to spend a huge chunk of my money. But at some point, you got to spend your money. You're going to have to add a couple of big pieces. So if it is Byron Murphy, again, I'm not going to hate it. I would hope it's closer to 15 to 16 mil on the good side, rather than the 22, 23 mil on the bad side. But I don't know. I don't really ultimately see it. I don't think Goody would go in this direction, but it's going to be interesting. Like I say, he's going to spend it somewhere. I really believe that. Really, truly believe that. You take him away from Minnesota, I think he would fit well in this Jeff Hafley defense. I should probably mention that as well. I think he would fit very, very well. And he's coming off a really nice season. And maybe he's starting to figure things out. Maybe the game's starting to slow down for him. And now maybe the next 3 years are going to be the best years of his career. So I wouldn't hate this one, but it's definitely not the direction that I would go in. I think it's going to end up being a little bit of an overpay. Let me know what you think. Would you sign him? Would you go in a different direction? Is there a different corner that you're more interested in? A Carlton Davis, a Rasul Douglas, whoever it might be? Let me know. I'd love to hear from you guys. Shoot me in the comments below. Don't shoot me, shoot the comments below. Appreciate that. You will find me right back here tomorrow on time. 5 a.m. Damn it, tomorrow. I'm going to be on time. I promise you guys. Right back on track. Day 2 of the new streak starts tomorrow. I'll see you guys then. Shout out to our All-Pro and Hall of Fame members, Mo State of Minnesota, and PJ Wynn, John Wild, Brandon Paletta, Jennifer Wright, Boom Handle, Donald Lee, Lori Lord, Baby QB, David McCluskey, Donald Decker, Alex Wong, Arnoldo Espinoza, Peter Ataka, Jay Zimmerman, B. Brown, Puerto Rican Packer, Dan Gassford, Step Keith, Dylan Pat Scott, Bobby Santoro, SoCal Pack, Chris Rager, Izzy Roberts, Ian Ewing, and Rasul Douglas time. I'll see you guys soon, but until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.